I know the weight you carry in the quiet hours. You have prayed with fervor, you have called his name in the darkness, and still the room feels vast and empty as a desert at midnight. You love God, this I know, but your heart whispers a terrible question. Does he see me now when I am breaking? I have been where you stand. I have knelt in prayer and heard only the echo of my own voice returning like a stranger. I have waited for an answer that never arrived in the form I expected, and the waiting itself became a kind of dying. You are not abandoned, though abandonment is what you feel. This is not betrayal, though the silence cuts like one. I speak to you not as one who escaped this night, but as one who learned to see in the dark. There is a way through, and it begins not with shouting louder, but with listening deeper. What I will share with you now is not theory drawn from books, but truth carved into my own flesh during the years when God seemed furthest, and was, in fact, closest. Stay with me. The silence you fear is about to speak. You can love God and still feel abandoned. I say this without ornament, because I have lived inside that contradiction until it became a doorway. There were nights in Kenya when I knelt on the prayer rug and felt nothing rise from my chest except exhaustion and a quiet, careful grief. The words of the prayer were correct, my posture was correct, but inside me was a hollow place where the beloved's presence used to rest like warm bread. I would finish the prayer and sit in the aftermath, listening to the silence stretch and stretch until it felt like accusation. Where are you? Why do you hide your face when I have done everything I know to do? The room looked the same as always, the oil lamp casting its small circle of gold, the wooden beams overhead, the worn carpet beneath my knees. But something essential had withdrawn, as if a tide had pulled away from the shore of my soul and forgotten the way back home. I remember one particular dawn, the air still gray and cool, when I woke before the call to prayer and lay there counting my breaths, because counting gave me something to hold. Inhale, 1, exhale, 2, inhale, 3. The breath moved through me slowly, mechanically, as if my body were performing a duty my heart had abandoned. I could hear the city beginning to stir outside, the distant sound of a door closing, footsteps on stone, the low murmur of a voice I could not make out. Life was continuing, I realized, even though I felt I had stopped. The thought did not comfort me. It made me feel more alone. Everyone else seemed to be moving forward while I remained locked in this strange, airless chamber of divine silence. I rose and went through the motions. I washed my face. I made my ablutions. I prayed because not praying felt like a betrayal worse than the silence itself. But as I prostrated, forehead to the ground, I felt the cold press of the earth against my skull and thought, this is all I have. This pressure. This floor, this breath. No ecstasy, no vision, no warmth flooding my chest, just the undeniable fact of my body bowing and the silence receiving it without comment. When I sat back on my heels, something small shifted in me. Not hope exactly, but a kind of grim faithfulness. I would continue. Not because I felt God near, but because something deeper than feeling insisted I remain. The pain of this season is specific and merciless. It attacks not your body, but your confidence in your own spiritual worth. You begin to wonder if you did something wrong, if there is some sin you have not named, some door you left open to let the presence slip away. You replay your recent days, searching for the moment of betrayal, the instant when God decided you were no longer worthy of his attention. And the cruelest part is this: you still love him. Your love does not die even when the response dies. You carry this love like a stone in your chest, heavy and unanswered, and the weight of it makes every step feel like climbing. I tell you now what no one told me then. This silence is not punishment. It is not absence. It is the valley where the soul learns to trust without reward, to love without echo, to bow without applause. God has not left. He has only removed the sweetness so you can learn the difference between feeling his presence and trusting his presence. The feeling comes and goes like weather. The trust must remain like bedrock, deep beneath the shifting surface. But oh, how this teaching burns, how it strips you down to your raw intention and asks, will you still seek me when I offer you nothing but myself, unadorned by consolation. There was an evening when Shams found me sitting by the window, staring at nothing. He did not ask what troubled me. He simply sat beside me in that generous way he had, as if my silence were a language he understood perfectly. After a long while he said, "The ney flute makes its most beautiful sound when the breath passes through its emptiness. You are being hollowed, Jalaluddin. Do not fear the knife." I wanted to argue with him, to say that I was not a flute but a man who needed God's voice, not this relentless quiet. But I said nothing, because part of me recognized the truth in his words, even as I resented them. Emptiness was not the enemy. It was the preparation. I began, slowly and with great resistance, to stop demanding that prayer feel like anything. I let it be boring. I let it be dry. I continued my prostrations not because they moved me, but because continuity itself became a kind of prayer. I woke each morning and placed my forehead on the same spot on the rug, and in that repetition, something began to grow that I can only describe as endurance. Not joy, not peace, but a stubbornness of the spirit that said, "I will not abandon you even if you seem to have abandoned me." This faithfulness without reward is the secret architecture of mature love. It is love that has passed through the fire of disappointment and chosen to remain anyway. I also learned to tend the small, visible things. When the invisible felt too vast and unmanageable, I turned my attention to what I could see and touch. I made my bed each morning, folding the blanket with care. I washed my cup after drinking. I swept the floor of my room slowly, attentively, as if the act of ordering my outer space could call order to my inner chaos. And it did, in a quiet, surprising way. The discipline of tending to small things gave my hands something holy to do while my heart learned to wait. Where you place your order, God places His provision, I came to understand. Not immediately, not dramatically, but surely. And there were moments, unexpected and fleeting, when grace broke through. A line from a psalm that suddenly burned with meaning, the way the evening light touched the wall and made the ordinary radiant. A stranger who smiled at me in the marketplace, and whose smile felt like a message meant only for me. These were not the grand visions I had longed for, but they were enough. They were the crumbs that kept me walking, the small signals that I was not alone, even when aloneness was all I could name. If you are in this silence now, I ask you to do one thing today. Find 5 minutes when you can sit without distraction. Place your hand on your chest, over your heart, and simply breathe. Do not try to pray eloquently. Do not try to feel anything. Just breathe in and say within yourself, "I am here." Breathe out and say, "You are here." Repeat this 10 times. Let your body remember that presence is not about feeling. It is about remaining. After those 5 minutes, rise and do one small act of order. Make your bed, wash a dish, place your shoes side by side. Let your hands bless what your heart cannot yet feel. This is the path through. Not a leap, but a step. Not a revelation, but a practice. I arrived at wisdom not as a pure vessel, but as one already cracked and leaking. This is important for you to know, because if you believe that only the unblemished can approach God, you will waste your life waiting for a perfection that never comes. I have fallen in the very ways I warned my own heart about. I have stood before my students and spoken of discipline, and then returned to my room and chased noise like a man running from his own thoughts. I have prayed with my whole body at dawn, and by evening found myself irritable, petty, distracted by trivialities that minutes before prayer would have seemed beneath me. I've loved with genuine tenderness, and in the same season wounded with careless words. I do not tell you this to scandalize you or to excuse failure, but to establish a ground we can both stand on, the ground of honest human struggling. There were seasons, and I speak of this with the kind of embarrassed clarity that only time allows, when I returned again and again to old patterns I thought I had outgrown. I would fast for days, feel the lightness of body and spirit, and then find myself eating past fullness just to fill some unnamed emptiness. I would commit to solitude, to letting my soul rest in God alone, and then seek out conversation, company, distraction, anything to avoid the echo of my own interior. It was not that I wanted darkness, it was that fatigue made my hands remember the old maps, the shortcuts back to numbness, the familiar refuge of what did not challenge or demand transformation. And the morning after would come, with its quiet sentinel of shame, standing at the door of my awareness, whispering the words I dreaded most. You will never change. You are the same as you have always been. Your efforts are performance, your prayers are pretense. I know that voice. I know it speaks to you too. It comes in the early hours when your guard is down, or in the middle of the day when you have stumbled again, said the thing you vowed not to say, returned to the habit you swore you had buried. I want to ask you a question, and I ask you to be honest with me and yourself. How many times have you promised yourself you would be different, only to find yourself repeating the same patterns? And how heavy is the shame you carry from this repetition? If this question touches something real inside you, if you recognize this weight, write in the comments, I am ready to stop pretending I have it all together. When you share this, you are not just freeing yourself from the prison of false strength, you are lighting a candle for someone else, still sitting in that same darkness, afraid they are the only one. Your courage to speak truth may be exactly what another weary soul needs to hear today to keep walking. Hear me, and let this sink to the deepest place in you. You do not need to pretend strength. God also lives in your weakness. In fact, He may live there more truly than in your victories, because weakness is where you finally stop performing and start receiving. I learned this not in my moments of spiritual triumph, when I felt the ecstasy of union and the poetry flowed from me like water from a spring, but in the gray mornings when I could barely rise, when my faith felt like ashes in my mouth, when I had nothing to offer but my empty hands and my tired heart. Those were the mornings when I learned that God's love is not a reward for my goodness, but a reality that exists regardless of my state. He does not love me more when I am disciplined and less when I am scattered. He loves because love is His nature, not because perfection is mine. This truth dismantled me. I had spent years building an identity around my spiritual attainment, around being the teacher, the poet, the one who had touched the hem of the divine. And then life, with its patient cruelty, showed me that I was still capable of pettiness, of jealousy, of anger, of fear. I was still capable of lying to myself about my own motives, and in the rubble of that revelation, I found something I had been searching for all along: mercy. Not the mercy I extended to others from a position of superiority, but the mercy I needed for myself, the mercy that says you are allowed to be human, you are allowed to fail and begin again, you are allowed to carry wounds and still be worthy of love. The wound you hide becomes the well you thirst beside. I saw this pattern in my own life and in the lives of those who came to me seeking guidance. They would present themselves as seekers of truth, but beneath the seeking was always a wound they dared not name. The father who abandoned them, the marriage that failed, the dream that died, the addiction that humiliated them, the poverty that shamed them. And they believed, mistakenly, that they had to heal this wound before they could approach God. But the opposite is true. You bring the wound to God, and in His presence it becomes the place of deepest meeting. The wound is not the obstacle, it is the doorway. I began to sit with my past as if it were a teacher sitting across from me in the lamplight. I did not try to erase it or rewrite it into something more palatable. I looked at the times I had been cruel and let myself feel the full weight of what I had done. I looked at the times I had been weak and let myself acknowledge that weakness without the need to justify it. I looked at the pleasures I had chased and the people I had hurt in that chasing, and I did not turn away. This kind of looking requires immense courage, because shame wants you to either deny the past or drown in it. But there is a third way: to harvest it, to take from it the seeds of understanding and plant them in the soil of your present life so that what was bitter might yet bear fruit. What I harvested from my wounds was compassion, not the soft, indulgent kind that excuses everything, but the fierce compassion that says, I see how hard you are trying. I see how many times you have fallen and risen. I see the invisible weight you carry, and I do not despise you for it. This compassion I learned to extend first to myself, and then, more naturally than I expected, to others. The person who had failed as I had failed no longer seemed contemptible, but human. The person who struggled with anger or lust or greed no longer seemed distant from me, but close, because I recognized in them the same battlefield I walked daily. And from this compassion came a new kind of prayer. Instead of praying from my strength, asking God to bless my efforts and crown my discipline, I began to pray from my poverty. I would come to the prayer rug and say simply, I am here, and I'm not enough, and that is the truth. I have failed again today. I have been small and scared and selfish. I do not know how to be better, but I'm here anyway. And in that honesty, a tenderness would sometimes arrive, not a voice or a vision, but a softness in the air around me, as if the room itself were holding me. This is what I had been seeking all along, not to be perfect, but to be held in my imperfection, not to be, sinless, but to be seen fully and loved anyway. I offer you this practice. Tonight, before you sleep, take 3 minutes to write down 3 specific things you are grateful for from this day. Not grand things, but small, true ones. The warm water that washed your face, the food that filled your stomach, the breath that kept moving in and out without your effort. Let gratitude be the antidote to the poison of shame. Where shame says you are unworthy, gratitude says you are accompanied. Where shame says you have nothing to offer, gratitude says you have already been given much. Write slowly, with attention, and as you write each one, let yourself feel it in your body. This is not magical thinking. This is the reorientation of attention from what is broken to what is still whole. And that reorientation is the first movement of healing. There is a moment when the scaffolding collapses. You have been building your life on certain assumptions, certain beliefs about how things work, who God is, what you deserve, what you can control. And then something happens, or perhaps nothing happens but the weight of accumulated silence, and suddenly the structure you trusted reveals itself to be less solid than you believed. The tricks that once distracted you no longer entertain. The prayers that once brought comfort now feel like words tossed into a void. The activities that filled your days now seem pointless, repetitive, a charade you are too tired to continue. You stand in the interior ruin of your own certainty, dust in your lungs, mind frantic as a bird caught in a room with no open window, beating itself against the glass because it cannot understand why the transparent is also impassable. I have stood in that ruin. I have felt the floorboards of my faith crack beneath me and known the stomach drop of free fall. I have asked questions that burned as they left my mouth, questions I was afraid to speak aloud because speaking them felt like betrayal, like the final severing of the thread that connected me to everything I had built my life upon. Where are you, God, when I can no longer hold myself together? Where are you when my strength is a thread, and even the thread frays? Where are you when I have done everything I know to do, and still the darkness deepens? These are not rhetorical questions posed in the safety of a classroom. These are the raw cries of a soul in collapse, and if you have cried them, you are not weak, you are awake. I will not polish this for you. The soul has earthquakes. The shelves of belief rattle and sometimes fall. The bottles of certainty you stored so carefully crash to the floor and break, and you are left standing in the wreckage wondering if anything you believed was ever true. I remember a night, and the memory still carries the taste of that particular despair, when I could not pray. Not would not, but could not. The words would not form. My body would not bow. I sat on the edge of my mat and felt a paralysis of spirit so complete that even weeping seemed too much effort. I thought, this is the end. This is what it feels like when faith finally dies. And the terror of that thought was not that I would be punished, but that I would be alone, adrift in a universe with no meaning, no direction, no beloved waiting at the end of the search. But beneath the crash, beneath the noise of my collapsing certainties, there was something still moving. It was so quiet I almost missed it. It was my breath. Inhale, exhale, exhale. My body, without asking permission from my despairing mind, continued its ancient rhythm, and I clung to that rhythm the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. I did not cling with hope, only with instinct. I followed the breath like a rope in a blizzard, not because I believed it would lead me anywhere, but because it was the only thing I could still do. I counted. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3. I did not count to calm myself or to achieve some meditative state. I counted to stay tethered to the present moment, to this breath and then this breath and then this breath, because the future was too terrifying and the past too heavy, and all I had was now. And here's what no one tells you about the darkest nights. They are long, but they are not infinite. They feel infinite while you are inside them, but they are not. At some point, without announcement, without fanfare, a thin gray light begins to edge the horizon of your awareness. It is not hope. It is not joy. It is something quieter and more durable. It is the stubborn fact of your continued existence. You are still here. You are still breathing. The collapse did not destroy you. And in that recognition, small as a seed, something new begins. If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here, I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. This is not entertainment. This is companionship for the journey. And the journey is long, and you will need reminders, and I am here to offer them. A memory visited me in those days of collapse. I was walking through the marketplace, moving through the crowd like a ghost, when I saw an old woman sitting by a stall, selling bread. She was arranging the loaves with such care, such attention, as if each one mattered. Her hands were gnarled with age, her face creased with years of sun and work, and yet there was a contentment in her movements that stopped me. I stood and watched her, and she looked up and met my eyes and smiled, a smile that asked nothing, offered nothing but itself. And in that moment, something in me eased. I cannot explain it. It was not a grand revelation. It was simply the warmth of one human recognizing another, and that warmth was enough to remind me that life, despite everything, still held moments of inexplicable grace. I began to notice other small things. The way light touched a floorboard in the late afternoon and turned it gold. The sound of water being poured into a cup. The texture of wool against my skin. The taste of bread, really tasted, not consumed while thinking of other things. These ordinary, humble experiences became my teachers. They said, "You are alive. You are here. This moment is real, and it asks nothing from you except that you notice it." I learned to rest in these moments without demanding that they mean something, without trying to extract a lesson or a sign from them. They were enough as they were, small, quiet affirmations that existence itself is a kind of prayer. I also learned that when the mind collapses, the heart must stand watch. The mind wants answers, wants explanations, wants to understand why this suffering, why this silence, why this particular darkness. But the heart is wiser. The heart knows how to wait without understanding. The heart knows how to love even when love brings no reward. The heart knows that fidelity is more important than feeling. So I gave my mind permission to be confused, to be angry, to be afraid, and I asked my heart to hold steady, not to solve, but to remain present, not to win, but to endure. And the heart, patient and strong in ways the mind is not, agreed. There was a practice I returned to again and again during this season. It was almost embarrassingly simple, and yet it saved me. I would sit quietly, close my eyes, and place my hand on my chest, over my heart. I would feel the beat, that steady drum that had been playing since before I was conscious, that would play until my last moment. And I would say, silently, "I am here." Just that. I am here. Not I am strong, not I am faithful, not I have it all figured out. Just, I am here. And after a few breaths I would add, "And you are here too." Not because I felt God's presence, but because I chose to trust it. I chose to believe that beneath my inability to feel, beneath the silence that felt like absence, there was a presence holding everything, holding even my doubt, holding even my collapse, This practice did not fix anything quickly. The darkness did not lift overnight, but it gave me a way to stay. It gave me a way to not abandon myself, even when I felt abandoned by everything else. And slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, a thin calm began to arrive. It was not persuasive. It was not dramatic. It was only honest. It said, "If God is silent, listen harder. If your mind collapses, let your heart stand watch. If you cannot pray with words, pray with breath. If you cannot see the path, take one step into the darkness and trust that the ground will hold you." The darkness did not vanish. It learned my name, and in learning my name, it loosened its grip just enough for me to move, not to escape, but to walk through. And as I walked, I discovered that the fall itself was not the disaster I feared it was. The fall was the ground. The fall was the place where all my false securities were stripped away so that what remained was only what was true. My breath, my heartbeat, my stubborn refusal to abandon the search even when the search felt hopeless. The fall was not failure. The fall was foundation. And on that foundation, bare and humble as it was, I could begin again. This is the turn, the moment when suffering either destroys or transforms, and the difference between those two outcomes is not luck or divine favor, but choice. Faith is not a feeling. It is the courage to remain when feeling leaves. The heart matures not in the moments of spiritual ecstasy, when God feels near and love flows easily, but in the ordinary nights when you must tend the lamp of your practice without reward, without applause, without any evidence that your efforts matter. I learned this through failure and repetition, through promising myself I would be different and then waking to find myself the same, through the slow realization that transformation does not arrive as a lightning bolt, but as a patient accumulation of small, faithful acts repeated until they reshape the landscape of the soul. Here is the simple thesis that saved me, and I offer it to you as plainly as bread. What you repeat is what you become, not what you wish, not what you intend, not what you promise in moments of inspiration, but what you actually do day after day when no one is watching and nothing dramatic is happening. The soul is formed by repetition the way a river carves stone, not through violence or haste, but through persistent, humble return. Choose holy repetition. Let love have a routine. Let discipline be not a punishment you inflict on yourself, but a kindness you offer your future self, a way of saying, "I trust you enough to keep this promise." I will share with you 3 practices that held me when everything else fell away. These are not complicated. They do not require special knowledge or spiritual attainment. They require only your willingness to begin, and then to begin again, and then to begin again. Think of them not as a ladder to heaven, but as a way to walk the earth with heaven inside you, a way to live that makes you available to grace without demanding that grace arrive on your schedule. The first practice is conscious silence. Each morning, before the day claims you, before the demands and the noise and the endless thinking begin, sit for 5 minutes, just 5. Set them aside as if they were holy, because they are. Find a place where you can be undisturbed. Close your eyes. Notice the river of thought without jumping into it. Thoughts will come. This is not failure. This is the nature of the mind. When a fear rises, greet it simply. I see you. When a memory knocks, answer. Not now. When worry about the future begins its familiar litany, interrupt it gently. I am here now. With each breath, with each slow inhale and exhale, say within yourself, here I am. Not here I am performing, not here I am achieving, just here I am. This is listening to God with the whole body. This is prayer without words, presence without agenda. You are creating a space inside yourself where the noise cannot reach, where the beloved can speak if he chooses, or where silence itself becomes the word you needed to hear. The second practice is small daily order. Choose one shelf of your life, one visible corner of your world, and tend it. Make your bed each morning as if it were an altar. Fold the blanket with care. Smooth the pillow. You are not doing this because unmade beds offend God. You are doing this because order outside cultivates order inside, because your future self deserves to return to a space that was prepared with love. Because this simple act is a declaration that today matters, that you are not just enduring, but tending. Wash the cup you used. Place your shoes together. Keep a promise to yourself so that you learn to trust yourself again. When the interior feels chaotic, and the mind spins with anxiety and the heart is heavy with unnamed grief, return to these small concrete acts. They are anchors. They are prayers spelled in physical form. Where you place your order, God places His provision. The third practice is service or gratitude. Each day offer one concrete act of love that asks nothing in return. Send a message of blessing to someone who is struggling. Do a quiet chore that no one will notice or thank you for. Leave a coin where a need waits. Or, if service feels too much, if the weight you carry makes even small gestures feel impossible, then write. Write 3 lines of thanks, even if the ink feels heavy, even if you must search hard to find 3 things: the bread that filled you, the water that quenched your thirst, the fact that you are still here, still breathing, still capable of this small act of attention. Gratitude and service are twins. Both move love from the interior to the exterior, and love must move to stay alive. A love that never acts becomes sentiment, pretty but powerless. Let your love have hands and feet. Practice these not perfectly, but persistently. You will forget. You will wake late and skip the silence. You will walk past the unmade bed because you are rushing. You will finish the day without having offered gratitude or service. This is not failure. This is being human. The practice is not in achieving perfection, but in returning. When you notice you have forgotten, simply begin again. No shame, no long confession of failure, just the quiet decision to return. Consistency is devotion in work clothes. Faithfulness is what remains when enthusiasm fades, and faithfulness is what shapes you over time into someone who can hold more light, more love, more truth. I learned this through my own stumbling. There were weeks when I kept these practices with diligence and felt the fruit of them, a calm that did not depend on circumstances, a spaciousness inside even when life pressed close, a sense that I was not alone even in solitude. And there were weeks when I abandoned them entirely, when I let the momentum of distraction carry me, when I woke and immediately reached for activity to avoid the silence. And in those weeks, I felt the difference, not as punishment, but as natural consequence. The lamp I had not tended went out. The garden I had not watered dried, and I had to begin again, humbled, grateful for the chance to return. Shams once told me something I resisted at the time but have come to understand as essential truth. He said, "The master is not the one who never falls. The master is the one who rises fastest. The speed of your return is what matters." How quickly do you notice you have strayed? How much time passes between the forgetting and the remembering? As you practice, that gap shortens. You become more sensitive to your own absence from yourself, and the sensitivity itself is grace, a sign that your soul is waking, that you are learning to live with attention rather than with sleepwalking. These practices are not magic. They will not solve all your problems or erase your pain or guarantee that God will speak in the way you long for Him to speak, but they will make you available. They will create the conditions in which transformation can occur. They will train your heart to remain steady when feelings storm. They will teach your body that discipline is not deprivation, but a kind of love, the love that says, "I care for you enough to give you structure, to give you something to hold on to when everything else is uncertain." And over time, slowly and without drama, you will notice that you are different, not fixed, not perfected, but changed in the way a field is changed by the farmer's faithful return, season after season, plowed and planted and tended until what was barren bears fruit. Constancy reshapes the soul the way water reshapes stone, not through violence, not through one dramatic moment of surrender, but through persistent, humble presence that works beneath the surface of awareness until one day you wake and realize you are not who you were. The transformation arrived so quietly I almost missed it. There was no thunderbolt, no vision, no moment when the heavens opened and a voice declared that I was changed. Instead, there was a morning when I woke before dawn, and the waking itself felt different. Not easier, but simpler. As if dawn were entering not just through the window, but from within me. As if the light outside and the light inside were part of the same sunrise. I lay there for a moment, hand on my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart, and I noticed the noise in my mind had softened. The relentless commentary, the anxious planning, the regret circling like a vulture, all of it had quieted to a murmur I could choose to listen to or not. I rose and made my bed, and the making of it felt not like duty, but like devotion. I folded the blanket slowly, placed the pillow with attention, and as my hands moved through these familiar motions, I felt a tenderness toward myself that surprised me. I was caring for my own life, for the space I would return to at the end of the day, and that care was a form of prayer I had not known existed. I went to the mat and sat in silence, and the silence was no longer empty or accusatory. It was full. It was refuge. The 5 minutes passed without struggle, without the desperate need to fill them with something, and when I opened my eyes, I felt I had been somewhere, though I had not moved at all. The day unfolded with a rhythm I recognized as new. I did my work with attention, not because I was trying harder, but because attention had become more natural than distraction. When a task arose, I met it without the old resistance, without the voice that said, "This is beneath me. This is not what I want. This is wasting my time." I simply did what needed to be done, and in the doing, found a kind of peace I had been chasing through more dramatic means for years. Routine became rhythm. The repetition I had feared as boredom revealed itself as structure, and structure, I discovered, is freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever I want whenever I want, but the freedom that comes from knowing what to do next, from having a path worn smooth by faithful walking. I began to see God not in the extraordinary, but in the humble choreography of the day. The steam that lifted from the kettle in the morning became a soft prayer ascending. The floor I swept without announcement became a meditation on service no one would praise, but that left the space cleaner, more whole. The bread I ate slowly, tasting each bite instead of consuming it while my mind wandered elsewhere, became communion. The breath itself, that ancient gift I had ignored for decades, became a psalm. Inhale, mercy; exhale, release; inhale, I receive; exhale, I offer. The ordinary was shot through with holiness, and I had not seen it because I had been looking for holiness only in the dramatic, only in the feelings that lifted me out of myself. But God, I learned, lives as fully in the humble as in the heights, and perhaps more so, because the humble is where we actually spend our lives. And life answered. Not immediately, not in the way I had imagined when I first began these practices, but steadily, truly. My work stabilized. The projects that had felt scattered and overwhelming began to cohere. I found I could focus longer, think more clearly, complete what I began. This was not because I had suddenly become more talented or more intelligent, but because I was present to what I was doing instead of constantly leaning toward what I was not doing, instead of living in the gap between where I was and where I thought I should be. Presence is power. When you are fully here, your energy is not divided, your attention is not split, and what you touch prospers because you are touching it with your whole self. Relationships found a simpler music. I stopped performing in conversations, stopped trying to be impressive or right or admired, and simply listened. And in listening, truly listening without planning my response or judging what I heard, I found that people opened to me in ways they had not before. They told me their struggles, their fears, their secret shames, and I received these offerings not as burdens, but as gifts, as signs that they trusted me enough to be real. And I could offer them truth in return, not the polished truth of someone who has it all figured out, but the messy truth of someone still walking the path, still falling and rising, still learning how to love without demanding that love be easy. Even money came, and I speak of this carefully because money is a tender topic, and I do not want to make false promises. But it is true. when I stopped chasing provision with desperation, when I focused instead on doing good work with integrity and trusting that faithfulness would be met with what I needed, provision arrived, not as a master commanding me, but as a servant offering what was required. I learned that money follows alignment the way water follows gravity. When your life is ordered, when you are tending what is in front of you with care and attention, when you are not scattering your energy in panic and grasping, resources find you. This is not magic. This is the natural order of a life lived with discipline and faith. Where the heart keeps watch in small things, heaven finds a door. I whispered this to myself often during those months, learning to believe what I was living. When I ordered my soul, life also ordered itself. Not perfectly, not without difficulty, but with a coherence that had been missing when I was constantly reacting, constantly in crisis, constantly looking for the next distraction from the work of simply being present to my own existence. The chaos outside had been a reflection of the chaos inside, and as the inside settled, the outside followed. This is the secret they do not tell you. You do not need to control your circumstances. You need to tend your interior, and your circumstances will arrange themselves around that tending. And often, when I faced a choice between noise and quiet, between the easy distraction and the harder presence, I remembered silence was my teacher. The silence I had feared, that I had run from, that I had filled with every kind of activity and sound, had taught me more than any book, any teacher, any experience. In silence, I learned to hear the still small voice beneath all the other voices. In silence, I learned that I was not my thoughts, not my feelings, not my anxious plans or my bitter regrets. I was the awareness that held all of these, and that awareness was spacious enough, kind enough, to let them come and go without being destroyed by them. Do not wait for a dramatic sign. The sign is your changed attention. The sign is the peace that does not depend on whether the day goes well or poorly. The sign is the courage to choose the next gentle, faithful step when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, when the only witness is God and your own honest heart. The sign is that you notice one morning that you are different, that the practices you have kept you, that you have been reshaped by repetition into someone who can hold more light than you could before. This is the transformation, slow, sure, unglamorous, and utterly real. Now I stand with gratitude, and I say this knowing that gratitude is not what I expected to feel when I began this journey. I thought the destination would be certainty, perfect faith, unshakable peace, a life without doubt or pain or difficulty. But what I have found is something both simpler and more profound. I am grateful not because I escaped pain, but because pain became a clean place to pray. The suffering I tried so hard to avoid, the darkness I feared would destroy me, the silence I interpreted as abandonment, all of it became the ground where my false self died so my true self could be born. I am grateful for the breaking, because it was in the broken places that light entered. I am grateful for the falling, because the fall taught me that there is ground beneath me, that I can descend and not be destroyed, that the bottom is not the end but a place to stand and begin again. The lesson is not complicated, though it took me decades to learn it, and I am still learning it with each new season of my life. Suffering can purify if you let it, if you do not harden against it or numb yourself to escape it, but instead walk through it with your eyes open and your heart as soft as you can bear. Silence can teach if you stop filling it with noise and distractions, and instead sit with it long enough to hear what it has been trying to tell you all along. And God does not abandon, though there are long stretches when he seems to, when his silence feels like rejection and his distance feels like punishment. What changed was not his nearness, but my hearing. He was always speaking. I was simply listening for the wrong language, expecting thunder when he was offering the quiet whisper of breath, expecting miracles when he was offering the humble grace of continuance. The heart learned to bow without collapsing. This is perhaps the most important thing I learned. Surrender is not the same as giving up. To bow is not to break. For years I confused the two. I thought that if I acknowledged my weakness, if I admitted I could not do this alone, if I stopped pretending to be strong and self-sufficient, I would fall apart entirely and never be able to rise again. But the opposite happened. When I stopped holding myself so rigidly upright, when I let myself bend, when I bowed not just in prayer, but in my whole posture toward life, I found that bowing creates space. It creates room for something larger than myself to enter, to hold what I cannot hold, to carry what is too heavy for my arms alone. The heart that bows is not weak. It is wise. It knows that there is one who can bear all things, and that our job is not to be that one, but to trust him. The mind learned to question without accusing. I used to think that doubt was the enemy of faith, that if I questioned, if I wondered, if I was unsure, it meant I was failing as a believer. But faith that cannot hold questions is not faith. It is rigidity pretending to be devotion. Real faith is spacious enough for doubt, for uncertainty, for the honest admission that there are things we do not understand and may never understand. The mind that questions without accusing is a mind that seeks truth rather than comfort, that would rather walk in honest darkness than pretend to see when it cannot. And God, I discovered, is not threatened by my questions. He welcomes them. They are signs that I am engaged, that I am not sleepwalking through faith but wrestling with it, and it is in the wrestling that we grow strong. The breath learned to bless what it could not understand. There were days, and there still are days, when nothing makes sense, when I cannot see the purpose, when the suffering of the world and the suffering in my own small life seems too much and too meaningless. On those days, I return to the breath. I place my hand on my chest. I feel the rise and fall, and I bless what I cannot understand. I say, I do not know why this is happening, but I trust that even this is held. I do not know where this path leads, but I will take the next step. I do not know what you are doing, God, but I consent to your work in me. This is not blind faith, it is practiced faith, faith that has been tested and tempered and has learned that trust is not about knowing, but about remaining. Receive these closing truths as you would receive a warm cloak on a cold night, wrapping them around your shoulders, letting them protect you from the harshness that life can bring. Silence is also an answer. It is not emptiness, it is fullness waiting to be discovered. It is not God's absence, it is God's invitation to listen more deeply. God does not delay, you are learning to wait. And the waiting itself is formation, is the kiln where your soul is fired into something that can hold more heat, more pressure, more truth. What pain did not destroy, it purified. The fire that you thought would consume you only burned away what was false, what was no longer serving you, what needed to die so that something truer could live. Where the heart keeps watch in small things, heaven finds a door. This is the aphorism I leave with you, not as decoration, but as a key. Faithfulness in the mundane is where holiness enters, not through grand gestures, but through quiet, repeated attention to what is small and unglamorous and necessary. If you need one action for today, let it be this simple, doable practice that you can begin right now, this moment, wherever you are. Choose a 5-minute sanctuary for yourself. Find a quiet place, sit down, and place your hand over your chest, over your heart. Count 10 patient breaths. Let them be slow. Let them be full. On each inhale, say within yourself, quietly where no one else can hear, I consent. You are consenting to this moment, to your life as it is right now, to God's work in you even when you cannot see it or feel it. On each exhale, say, I release. You are releasing control, releasing the need to understand everything, releasing the grip of fear and worry and the demand that life be different than it is. Breathe in, I consent. Breathe out, I release. Do this 10 times. When you rise from those 5 minutes, do one small act of order or service. Make your bed. Wash a dish. Write a brief message of kindness to someone. Let your faith wear shoes. Let it walk in the world through your hands and your attention and your small, faithful choices. I bless you with quiet courage, the kind that does not announce itself or demand recognition, but simply shows up day after day and does what needs to be done. I bless you with the grace to start again, because you will need to start again many times, and each time you do, you are not going backward, but deepening, spiraling closer to the truth of who you are and who God has always known you to be. I bless you with the peace that comes not from having all the answers, but from trusting the one who holds all questions. May you walk gently with yourself. May you be patient with your own unfolding. May you know that you are seen, you are held, you are loved exactly as you are right now, in this moment, with all your wounds and all your beauty. If this message resonated in your soul, subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who chose the path of true transformation, for those who are willing to walk the harder road of honesty and presence, and leave in the comments, "I choose to begin again." This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back home, back to yourself, back to the one who has been waiting for you with infinite patience and love that does not end.